Have you ever walked away from a family conversation with a heavy heart, wondering, did they really mean what they just said? Sometimes it's not shouting or obvious arguments that hurt us the most. It's the quiet remarks, the dismissive tone, or the words that make us feel invisible. As we grow older, many of us hope our homes will become places of peace, respect, and understanding. Yet family life is rarely perfect. Different generations often have different expectations, different ways of communicating, and different ways of showing love. The truth is, not every painful comment is meant to hurt, but some repeated patterns deserve our attention. In today's video, we'll explore 5 common phrases or situations that may signal unhealthy family communication. More importantly, we'll talk about how to respond with wisdom, dignity, and emotional strength. Because true peace doesn't come from winning every argument. It comes from protecting yourself, respect while leaving room for understanding. Stay with me until the end, because the 5th lesson may change the way you see family relationships forever. Imagine you've spent your whole life caring for your family. You've celebrated birthdays, stayed awake through sleepless nights, sacrificed your own comfort, and always tried to be there when someone needed you. One day, you calmly express that something hurt your feelings. Instead of being heard, someone quickly replies, "You're overreacting." At first glance, those words may seem harmless, but when they are repeated again and again, they can leave you feeling that your emotions don't matter. Every person, regardless of age, deserves to have their feelings acknowledged. Being listened to doesn't always mean the other person agrees. It simply means they recognize that your emotions are real. Sometimes these words come from stress, impatience, or misunderstanding rather than bad intentions. Younger family members may be juggling careers, finances, and raising children. That pressure can make conversations shorter and less thoughtful. Still, understanding someone's stress doesn't mean ignoring your own feelings. Wisdom teaches us something powerful. Never allow another person's rushed response to define your worth. Instead of reacting with anger, try responding calmly. You might say, "I'm not asking you to agree with me. I'm simply asking you to understand how I feel." That one sentence shifts the conversation away from conflict and toward understanding. Many family disagreements grow bigger because both sides stop listening. One person wants to be heard, while the other wants to defend themselves. Real healing begins when someone chooses patience over pride. Remember this? Your value is not determined by how quickly someone validates your feelings. It comes from the life you've lived, the kindness you've shown, and the wisdom you've earned through decades of experience. Sometimes the strongest response isn't raising your voice. Sometimes it's speaking gently, standing firmly, and refusing to let bitterness take root in your heart. Because emotional strength isn't about winning arguments. It's about protecting your peace. As families grow and change, every generation brings new traditions, new routines, and new ways of thinking. Change itself isn't the problem. In fact, change is a natural part of life. The real challenge begins when change is presented in a way that makes someone else feel as though their experience no longer matters. Imagine this scene. You offer a simple suggestion based on decades of raising a family. Before you can even finish your sentence, someone replies, "That's the way we do things now." Perhaps they don't mean to sound dismissive. Perhaps they're simply explaining their preferred way. But if that response becomes the answer to everything you say, it's easy to start feeling as though your voice has slowly disappeared from the family conversation. One sentence rarely damages a relationship. A repeated pattern can. Every senior has something priceless that younger generations cannot buy, download, or learn overnight. Life experience. You've seen difficult times. You've solved problems. You've made mistakes. You've celebrated victories. Those experiences are part of your family's story. At the same time, every younger generation faces challenges that didn't exist years ago. Technology changes quickly. Careers are different. Parenting advice evolves. Financial pressures are often overwhelming. Both generations have something valuable to offer. The strongest families don't choose between old wisdom and new ideas. They combine them. If someone says, "That's the way we do things now," instead of feeling defeated, try asking a gentle question. "I'd love to understand your way. May I also share why we used to do it differently?" Notice what happens. You're not demanding agreement. You're inviting conversation. People are far more willing to listen when they don't feel attacked. And if they still aren't ready to hear you, remember something important. Wisdom isn't measured by how many people accept your advice. It's measured by your ability to remain kind even when your advice isn't followed. One of life's greatest lessons is learning the difference between being needed and being valued. You may not always be asked for advice. That doesn't mean your wisdom has lost its worth. Sometimes your greatest influence comes quietly. By living with patience, by showing respect first, by becoming the example you wish others would follow. Because people often remember our actions much longer than our words. So don't let one difficult conversation convince you that your lifetime of experience has no value. It does, and it always will. As we move to the next lesson, we'll look at another common phrase that can quietly create emotional distance within families. And more importantly, how responding with calm confidence can strengthen your self-respect instead of weakening it. There comes a moment in many families when roles begin to change. The people who once made every important decision gradually step back while younger family members take on more responsibility. This transition is natural. It happens in almost every family. But even when change is expected, it can still be emotional. Imagine spending decades caring for your home, raising children, managing finances, remembering birthdays, solving problems, and making countless sacrifices. Then one day, when you ask a simple question or offer to help, someone smiles and says, "Don't worry about it anymore." Those words may be spoken with kindness. They may come from a genuine desire to help. But when they become a habit, especially if they leave you out of conversations or decisions, they can create an unexpected feeling of loneliness. Many seniors don't fear growing older. What they fear is becoming invisible. Feeling included is a basic human need. It doesn't disappear with age. In fact, for many people, it becomes even more important. Think about Mr. Robert, a retired teacher who spent 40 years guiding students and supporting his family. Every holiday, he carefully planned meals, organized gatherings, and made sure everyone felt welcome. As time passed, his children naturally began taking over those responsibilities. One year, they organized the family celebration without telling him until everything had already been decided. When he quietly asked about the plans, someone replied, "Don't worry about it. We've already handled everything." No one intended to hurt him, but that evening he sat alone for a while, wondering whether his opinions still mattered. What made him sad wasn't the celebration. It was the feeling that he had been left out of something that had always been part of his identity. Situations like this happen in many families. Sometimes they happen because everyone is busy. Sometimes people assume they're helping. Sometimes they simply don't realize how their actions affect someone they love. That's why communication matters so much. Instead of staying silent and allowing hurt feelings to grow, consider expressing your thoughts calmly. You might say, "I appreciate everything you're doing. It would simply mean a lot to me if I could be included in the conversation." Notice the difference. You're not criticizing anyone. You're sharing your feelings honestly and respectfully. That kind of response often opens doors instead of closing them. There's another lesson hidden here. Our sense of purpose should never depend entirely on one role. For years, you may have been the decision maker, the caregiver, the provider, or the family organizer. Those roles are meaningful, but they are not the whole story of who you are. Your value isn't measured by how many decisions you make today. It's measured by the wisdom, compassion, and character you've built over a lifetime. One of the greatest strengths we can develop is learning to adapt without losing our dignity. Adaptation doesn't mean giving up. It means finding new ways to contribute. Perhaps your advice becomes less frequent but more meaningful. Perhaps your encouragement becomes the steady voice that brings peace during difficult times. Perhaps your greatest gift is simply being the person who listens without judgment. Families don't always need another person telling them what to do. Sometimes they need someone who reminds them what truly matters: kindness, patience, gratitude, and love. If you've ever felt overlooked, remember this: being quieter does not make you less important. Being older does not make you less valuable. Your presence, your experience, and your love continue to shape your family in ways that may not always be obvious. The strongest trees don't prove their strength by making noise. They provide shade, stability, and shelter year after year. Your life can do the same. And sometimes, the people around you don't fully appreciate that until much later. So don't measure your worth by how often you're consulted. Measure it by the integrity with which you continue to live. Because true respect begins with the way we respect ourselves. There are few phrases more common in family conversations than these 4 simple words. Things are different now. In many situations, that statement is true. The world has changed in remarkable ways. Technology has transformed how we communicate. Families often live farther apart. Daily life moves at a faster pace than it did decades ago. But sometimes, those words carry an unintended message. Not because of the words themselves, but because of how they're delivered. Imagine sharing a lesson you learned through years of experience. Perhaps you're talking about raising children, managing money, or keeping a marriage strong. Before you've even finished, someone smiles politely and says, "Things are different now." The conversation ends, your story remains unfinished, and for a brief moment, you wonder whether everything you've lived through has somehow become outdated. If you've ever felt that way, you're not alone. Many older adults experience moments like these. It's not always about disagreement. More often, it's about feeling unheard. Yet here's an important truth. Just because times change doesn't mean wisdom loses its value. Technology changes, fashion changes, jobs change, even the way families communicate changes. But honesty, kindness, patience, integrity, those values never go out of style. Think about 80-year-old Margaret. She often shared stories with her grandchildren about growing up with very little money. She talked about repairing broken things instead of replacing them, saving every dollar she could. and finding happiness in simple family dinners. At first, her grandchildren listened politely, but didn't seem very interested. One day, during a difficult financial period, one of them remembered her words. Instead of buying something on impulse, they saved their money. Instead of giving up, they stayed patient. Months later, that grandchild visited Margaret and said, "I didn't understand your advice back then, but now I do." Margaret smiled. She didn't need to prove she was right. Life had become her greatest teacher, and that's something every senior should remember. Not every lesson is understood immediately. Some lessons take years before they make sense. Sometimes the seeds you plant today don't grow until long after the conversation has ended. That's why you should never measure your wisdom by another person's immediate reaction. Your role isn't to force people to agree with you. Your role is simply to share what you've learned with love and humility. Then allow others the freedom to choose what they do with it. One of the greatest mistakes any family can make is believing that one generation has all the answers. The younger generation often brings energy, creativity, and new perspectives. The older generation brings patience, experience, and lessons that only time can teach. Neither is complete without the other. The strongest families don't compete across generations. They learn from each other. If someone says, "Things are different now," instead of feeling rejected, try responding with curiosity. You might say, "You're right. Many things have changed. I'd love to hear how you see it. And if you're interested, I'd also like to share what helped me during similar challenges." Notice how different that feels. You're not arguing. You're not defending yourself. You're creating a bridge instead of building a wall. That is emotional wisdom. It's understanding that respect grows through conversation, not through winning debates. There will always be moments when your advice isn't followed. There will always be moments when people choose a different path. Don't let those moments convince you that your voice no longer matters. Some of the greatest influences in history weren't fully appreciated until much later. The same can be true within a family. Your calm example, your quiet strength, your ability to forgive, your willingness to listen, these qualities often speak louder than words ever could. Remember this: a wise person doesn't need to be the loudest voice in the room. They become the steady presence everyone turns to when life becomes uncertain. As the years pass, people may forget specific conversations, but they rarely forget how you made them feel. If your words consistently bring peace, encouragement, and understanding, your influence will continue long after the discussion ends. Because true wisdom isn't about proving that you're right. It's about helping the people you love become their very best. There is a quiet truth that many people don't fully understand until later in life. Not every battle deserves your energy. Not every disagreement needs a winner. And not every misunderstanding can be solved with the perfect words. One of the greatest gifts that comes with age is the ability to recognize the difference between what you can control and what you cannot. For much of your life, you may have believed it was your responsibility to fix every problem in the family. You wanted everyone to get along. You wanted your children to succeed. You wanted your grandchildren to grow up surrounded by love. Whenever conflict appeared, your first instinct may have been to step in, offer advice, or try to bring everyone together. That instinct came from love. But there comes a time when wisdom asks something different of us. Instead of trying to control every outcome, it invites us to protect something even more valuable: our inner peace. Think about Helen, a 78-year-old grandmother. For years, she worried about every disagreement in her family. If one child seemed upset, she couldn't sleep. If there was tension during a family gathering, she blamed herself. She carried burdens that were never truly hers to carry. One afternoon, while talking with an old friend, she heard a sentence that changed her life. You can love your family deeply without carrying every problem on your shoulders. At first, those words felt impossible. How could a loving mother or grandmother stop worrying? But over time, Helen realized something important. Worry and love are not the same thing. You can care without constantly suffering. You can support someone without sacrificing your emotional health. You can pray for your family without feeling responsible for every decision they make. That realization brought her a peace she hadn't felt in years. Perhaps you've experienced something similar. Maybe you've replayed conversations in your mind long after everyone else has forgotten them. Maybe you've wondered whether you should have said something different. Maybe you've stayed awake thinking about words that can no longer be changed. If so, remember this: the past cannot be rewritten. But the next conversation can always be approached with greater wisdom. One of the most powerful habits any senior can develop is learning to pause before reacting. When emotions rise, pause, take a deep breath. Ask yourself, will my next words bring us closer together or push us farther apart? That single moment of reflection can change the entire direction of a conversation. Real strength is not speaking first. Real strength is speaking wisely. Another lesson worth remembering is that respect begins within. When you treat yourself with kindness, patience, and dignity, you become less dependent on constant approval from others. That doesn't mean hurtful words never affect you. They will. We're all human. But they no longer define who you are. Your identity is built on a lifetime of experiences. The children you raised, the challenges you overcame, the sacrifices you made, the kindness you offered when no one was watching. Those things cannot be erased by one difficult conversation. There is also great freedom in accepting that every generation has its own journey. Just as your parents once watched you make choices they didn't fully understand, today's younger generation is learning through its own experiences. Sometimes people need time before they recognize the value of your wisdom. And that's okay. A gardener doesn't dig up a seed every day to see if it's growing. They water it. They trust the process. Then, one day, your growth appears. Your love, your example, and your patience work in much the same way. The kindness you show today may not be fully appreciated tomorrow, but its impact can last for years. Never underestimate the quiet influence of a peaceful heart. People are naturally drawn to those who remain calm during difficult moments. They remember the family member who listened without judging, the one who forgave instead of keeping score, the one who offered hope instead of criticism. That kind of influence cannot be measured. It is felt. And often, it becomes the legacy that future generations remember most. As you continue your journey, remind yourself of these simple truths. Your worth is not determined by someone else's opinion. Your wisdom does not disappear because the world has changed. Your kindness is never wasted. Your love still matters, and your presence is one of the greatest gifts you can offer your family. So choose peace over pride. Choose understanding over assumptions. Choose patience over anger. And whenever life gives you the opportunity, choose love. Because at the end of the day, families are not held together by perfect conversations. They are held together by imperfect people who keep choosing grace, compassion, and hope. Conclusion: if today's message touched your heart, remember that every family faces challenges. What truly makes the difference is not avoiding every misunderstanding, but responding with wisdom, respect, and love. Thank you for spending these moments with us. If you found encouragement in this video, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who may need this message today. And before you go, we'd love to hear from you in the comments.